So, my name is Arie Olson. I started at Surefire Ag Systems in the middle of May, so kind of when everything was getting hectic, which I'm glad that Surefire was still able to get my internship there. My position was electrical engineering intern, nickname intern if they didn't want to call me by my name. But a little bit about Surefire. Their headquarters is just north of Atwood, a few miles out of town, so it's kind of in the country, but it's still pretty close to town if you need to go in and get stuff. But they basically focus on improving the efficiency of agriculture. So with farming, I bet you a lot of people from the city would say that there's still people in like old tractors hauling like old plows all rusted out and everything, but on Surefire's front, they're doing a lot to improve the efficiency and make it to where, with our growing population, you can get more food, get the right fertilizer in the right amounts and everything, and just make it a more efficient process versus the old-time farmer process, I guess. So I grew up in Atwood, graduated in 2019. I originally am not from this area. I moved to Atwood in 2007, so most of my younger life was growing up in Atwood, so I guess I call that home. I am attending K-State. I just got finished with my freshman year at college, so I'll be going. We're seeing about the classes there, but it's mostly going to be all online for my sophomore year. Growing up, I was always kind of interested in technology and electronics. I built my own computer when I was a sophomore in high school, which isn't that big of a deal nowadays. You can kind of get through everything through YouTube and stuff, but it's still an accomplishment. I still have that computer, can kind of add stuff into it, make it better each year. So at Surefire, I was mainly focused on two projects. So on the left is a Sentinel, which is kind of like a flow control device. The lights on it are supposed to turn on whenever there's like water, fertilizer, whatever mixture is going through there. On the right is a manifold controller that kind of is in control of a bunch of different valves and sections that connect into it. So it's kind of like the brains behind it. And that project was mainly just on the code, which is my worst enemy we'll get to later. So first day there, I was introduced to a program or software called Altium. So on the left here, you have a schematic. So all those big yellow pieces or the big one is the microchip that we're using, or the processor. And this is kind of where everything starts, and you get your numbers worked out, what kind of values you need, and be able to create your connections on here. And each of these parts on here, the components, they come with this thing called a footprint, which is kind of like the 3D model and what it's going to look like in real life. So you start with what's on the left, convert everything, and then you can make your PCB or printed circuit board, sorry, on the right. So on the right, it kind of has this shape. Here's what it looks like in real life. Kind of got some connections here, but we originally started with a 9-volt battery pack and quickly realized that it wouldn't really last as long as we wanted it to. So one thing I learned with just this project is kind of in the engineering field, you're doing a lot of product testing, and each time you order new boards, you only get those boards because it'd be way too expensive to just make changes and then order boards, and it would take too long. So each time you get a board, you mess around with it. Hopefully it works when it first comes in, but of course in my case it never worked the first time. So I had to do a lot of trial and error. So on the second revision, which is the one I have here, we added a wall plug-in, and I also added a motion sensor, which I didn't add the motion sensor because it would just be going off this entire time. But basically, when I was introduced to this project, it was, we need you to make something for Sentinel that we can take to one of our shows and have it kind of like a display stand. And Later on, it kind of turned into, instead of just for traveling shows, they also wanted this to be a product that they could create a display for, and instead of having the Sentinel itself, it's just that circuit board and then the Sentinel cover. And later on, they're saying that we wanted to give those out to dealers, so it's kind of a little bit of marketing to get Sentinel out there and catch people's attention. Instead of just having to talk about it, there's going to be kind of a thing that's going out to Surefire dealers. So this is kind of a little bit extra. On the right is a thing called a breadboard. So on my first set of boards, I wasn't able to, this pin or this connector right here is how you would program it. Of course, I didn't realize it, but I had the connections messed up on that. So I went onto a breadboard to kind of figure that out, and was able to get it working at least before the next revisions. So on to the next one. I don't really have an example for this, or a physical example other than the pictures, because most of this project was all coding. And coming into this, coding was my worst nightmare. I went to K-State for computer engineering, and I saw the amount of coding classes I had later on, and then I had like a little taste of coding in one of my intro classes, and I thought to myself, I was like, I don't want to go down that route. So I changed to electrical engineering, which is basically a brother to computer engineering, and I went from about 5 programming classes to about like 1 or 2. So a little bit more manageable. And at Surefire, my mentor, Albert, he's a lot more knowledgeable when it comes to coding. So he was able to kind of, one thing he did was, instead of telling me exactly how to do something, he would tell me like, oh, what you could do, and then that was all. Like, he would just kind of give me a little bit at a time, and then I'd follow that little breadcrumb path, you know? Which is a great way, because I felt like I learned a lot better doing that and just kind of diving into it. But in the middle here, or the top left, is the manifold controller. On the right is the tester board. So this board was created by an intern previous to me. And the whole point of it is there's another section of Surefire called SFE, or Surefire Electronics, aside from Surefire Ag. And they use this board whenever they're creating the wiring harnesses for these devices. They put them all together, and this board here is just kind of plug everything in, run this program that tests it, and make sure that all the connections are right, so that you're not sending out a bad product to any of our consumers. I actually had to make another one of these boards, which wasn't too bad. It's a lot of small pieces. You can't be very shaky whenever you're messing around with this stuff, or else it doesn't turn out very good. On the right is kind of like the output screen. I've stared at that black screen for a long time. So this is basically whenever they're testing, this is what the board will give back to you and kind of the output of it. This is the schematic that I was also staring at a lot. And this is just for the harnessing. So what I was changing in the code, there was already code there previously. In the top left here, that's the inputs. So on that, the code was running, and it would turn something on, and you can see through the connections there, something else would turn on. If you flip a switch over here, what else is it going to turn on? So that was the code that was there before. My job was to create a code that not only checked for what was turned on, but making sure everything else was turned off. So if there's any kind of short, or basically anything wrong with the wiring harness after production, my code is able to kind of decipher, and I have it in there to where it's pretty user-friendly. So instead of just saying like, oh, there's a problem with this thing, I had to kind of put it in layman's terms and be like, there's a problem with the yellow wire, and kind of things like that that you don't really realize whenever you're creating something for other people to use, is you have to make it a lot easier for them to use it and just make it understandable. Some takeaways. So improved knowledge of real-world applications. I can recall in college, one thing I had to do was make a line-following robot for one of my classes, and in my head, like, it doesn't seem that useful, you know? So the stuff that I was working on, I felt like I was actually doing something useful with my time. Obviously, everything at K-State's kind of to start from the bottom and build up, but I just felt like everything I was doing at Surefire, and like even stuff I wasn't doing, and I was just witnessing the production and the steps that Albert was taking on what he was working on, and my coworkers, was just, it was really eye-opening in the whole engineering field. Major coding improvement. Yesterday for our intern review, I think was the first time Albert told me my coding was atrocious at the beginning, which I knew that, just he didn't say it until yesterday. But in that, he also said I improved a lot, which is probably why he felt he could say that. But coding was just, it's basically like looking at a completely different language made from the same alphabet that we have. And I don't know if any of you guys have looked at any code, but it kind of hurt my head whenever I was a beginner. Now, I can't really look at code the same way. I have a lot better understanding of it, and it's a big improvement that I'm very proud of myself of. Third, engineering workplace experience. Before working at Surefire, I was mostly manual labor, so I worked concrete in Colby and Brewster, and then I worked at the elementary school in Atwood over the summers for like 3 years. So this was kind of my first like desk job. I'm pretty sure someone else had that experience as well. But it was just so eye-opening to see the communications between sales and marketing, engineers, people out in the field, design team, everything like that. You don't get exposed to that in college. And so that's kind of a really big thing that I picked up on just working there. Advice from peers. Basically, I took all my orders from Albert, but there's also people around me that I learned from, and sometimes they'd be like, hey, intern, let's go and go look at something, you know? And they'd try and teach me stuff, but I don't know, it's really cool people that work out at Surefire. Another thing, internship experience versus college experience. To kind of go back to like the line following robot, I just felt like this internship experience I learned like a lot more in the span of around 3 months than I did my whole freshman year. And really, you pick up on a lot of things, like not only just what goes on in your career, but like life building things. So one big thing I got into was investing and kind of thinking about my future more instead of just the next year at college. Putting stuff back. In my thank yous to Surefire and Next-Gen, I have a little story. So attending K-State, there's this event called a career fair. So this is an opportunity for students to go to and kind of get exposure, and for companies to go there and kind of look at what K-State has to offer and try and give out internships. Surefire, you used to do this, I believe. Yeah, I'm pretty sure they were there at one point. But going there as a freshman, it was pretty lackluster. Every single person I talked to, and I wasn't trying to be shy or anything, I was going out there, getting out of my comfort zone and going up to these like random companies. Every single person there didn't offer internships until you were a junior or a senior. Yeah, I think you'd probably know about that, you went to K-State, but something like that is just like, I mean, I was dressed up, I was like, oh, I'm going to the career fair, I'm doing something with my freshman year, and then you go there and you don't really have anything. And it kind of sucked, really. It was good for me to go and kind of understand what was going on there, but as a freshman, it wasn't that big of a deal. And then in comes Next-Gen. Here we have people in high school just getting a head start on anyone else, because a lot of places, especially over east, they don't have opportunities like this, and everything is kind of just like pushed up to, oh, you have to be this tall to ride the ride, you know? Here at Next-Gen, it's it's really good what you guys are doing here, and I just want to thank you guys for all that. It's a really big opportunity. I've always kind of wanted to work for Surefire. Growing up in Atwood, they're very prominent in our community. They're a lot of donors, and they just do a lot of good stuff. So I'm glad I could work with them. Thanks to Albert for everything that I was able to soak up during the summer. Hopefully a lot, but yeah, thank you guys. I think that's it.